Hello, and welcome to another episode of the William Branham Historical Research Podcast. I'm your host, John Collins, the author and founder of William Branham Historical Research at william-branham.org, and with me I have my very special guest, Lexi Sanchez, former member of Christ for the Nations. Lexi, it's good to finally have you on. I've been dying to get more people from Christ for the Nations, CFNI as other people label it. There's just so much going on. We've been talking about the things going on with Vance Belter and now the news media's investigation into CFNI. And I kind of really labeled that as irrelevant to the whole conversation. The deeper conversation is, how did CFNI sway American Christianity into basically what became the NAR, the New Apostolic Reformation, and why did it do it, and what was behind the motivations? And for me to piece together all of that puzzle, I need more input from people who were involved with Christ for the Nations. So welcome to the podcast. Maybe if you could tell everybody just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, awesome. I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me. My name's Lexi Sanchez. I'm originally from Houston, Texas, moved up here to Dallas 10 years ago now. So I went to CFNI in 2015. I was freshly 18 years old. I've been here ever since. I graduated from CFNI in 2018, and I worked there for 2 years, and then I left. And since then, I've just been doing full-time photography with my husband, who I also met at CFNI. I haven't been working in ministry since I left. I was working briefly at a church after I left CFNI, but the church has a very strong relationship to CFNI, so it's a lot of the same beliefs and kind of ways of thinking, and so it just wasn't for me anymore. So my husband and I left kind of shortly after that. So that's all I can think to say.
So I'm interested to hear specifically about those beliefs, and I understand you have a much broader story, so maybe at some point in the story you can go into this, but wanting people to understand the difference between CFNI, what it teaches, and what broader Christianity teaches.
Yes.
So that's really, honestly, when you said you're coming on board and you mentioned that you were with Christ for the Nations originally, I wanted to know more about that. So
yeah.
So maybe as you tell your story, you can inject that. But so you met your husband at Christ for the Nations, and tell us what that was like. What was dating like at CFNI? Tell us the whole story.
I have two friends. They were my roommates, and they're like my best friends in the whole world. And we all met our husbands there, and we all say that we are survivors. Like, if your relationship can make it out of, if your relationship can make it out of CFNI, you're good. You can make it anywhere, because just the pressure. And there's this joke that they have at Christ for the Nations where they call it Brides for the Nations. And it's so weird. Like, when you're there, you already kind of feel weird about it. At least I felt weird about it. I thought I really didn't like that. And there's a lot of pressure to like find your spouse when you're there. And it's really icky. And but at the same time, the rules that they have around dating are very rigid and impossible, honestly. And I do feel like they treat women very harshly in those environments too. There's a lot of pressure on women to don't make the boys, sin, or don't make them lust. It's all the pressure on the girls. You have to make sure you're wearing shirts that are long enough to cover your bottom, because God forbid if a man sees your butt, like, that's even if you're wearing jeans. So it was a lot of pressure, but my husband and I started dating, I think it was my third semester. We had been friends since my first semester, but we hadn't hung out too much. But we kind of started hanging out more, just with like groups of friends and things like that. And we realized we like each other. And I feel our perspective of relationships was a lot different than other CFNIers' perspectives. Like we had a bit more, I guess, like we weren't like, oh, marriage is this thing and it's, God put us together and he chose us to be together. Because there's a lot of that there, which on its own is very unhealthy and just not good. And it shows because, yeah, relationships usually from CFNI don't do very well because there's a lot of just unrealistic ways of thinking and just mystical thinking that just is not good for the real world, like the material world. But my husband and I were very like honest, like, okay, like, with a relationship, you have to work on these things, be honest with each other. And honestly, I feel like we were really lucky. We always say that we found each other on hard mode because of the environment we were in. But yeah, I feel like I wouldn't have been able to kind of untangle all the wires from the situation and like from where we were without him. Like he definitely helped me work through that. I think that us being there for each other, we were able to like work through a lot of the stuff that we experienced, like talk through that. Like our first year of marriage, it was like we would just go on walks around the CFNI track outside, and we would just like talk about because we were reading a lot too and trying to understand our beliefs and believe the system that we were under, and the church history, and what it means for us now where we're living, like in America and in the world we are. And I'm just really grateful I had him. But yeah, dating at CFNI was a lot of pressure, and there's always like, people are always like, "Oh, are you guys holding hands? Oh, are y'all doing this?" And it just was just so weird, and it just didn't feel very, I don't know. It was very hard, I will say, but we made it. We survived. We've been married almost 6 years now, so we're doing all right. But yeah, it was tough. I will say it was tough.
You're describing my childhood. And the funny part is, if you're female listening to this and you've never experienced this, you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is horrific. And the women have it so much harder than men. Well, I can assure you that same environment is just as hard, in some ways maybe more difficult for the men because of what it does to the heads of the men. So picture what you said about covering the butt. We had the same thing. You weren't, it was the women's fault. If a guy looks at you, it's her fault. That you looked at her, right? But they took it a step further to the ankles. You cannot look at the women's ankles in the Branhamism. And so you're stuck with all of that weirdness. But dating was difficult to navigate because there were different levels of, I'm just going to use the word destructiveness, that the groups had. One group that I visited, they took it so far that when you were dating, a female could not travel in a vehicle with a male. As weird as this sounds, so after church, we were all going to go out to eat. There were, I want to say that there were 8 or 9 guys and 2 girls all going to go out to eat. Well, they all had to ride in my vehicle. All the guys had to ride in my vehicle, and I had this little sports car, so we were crammed in, people laying across people, and one of the females driving had a big Lincoln Continental, I think it was, and so she could have fit the whole party in her vehicle, but we couldn't ride there. So here I am. We literally had a guy laying across from front to back with his feet in the dash and his head in the back console. That's how bad it was. And you don't really think about what that does to the man's head. But picture being a man telling them that they cannot look at the parts of a female body because specific parts God created as evil for you to look at. And then think about what that does in making the men, wiring their brain to objectify women. That's essentially what happens. And it is terrible, and it takes a long, long time for men who escape this to get over it.
Completely. And I mean, I've had that conversation with my brother and my husband. My about just the way that it alienates the way like men think, and like it makes, so an example kind of speaking to what you're saying, like I had a friend who, one of the reasons why I went to Christ for the Nations was there's a childhood friend from home who started going there a year before I did, and he was like a big brother to me. He was a bit older than me, and but he was one of the worship leaders, so he was like someone that was really close to my family, and he was like family. And so him and I, whenever I started going to Christ for the Nations, we would hang out a lot because, I'm just turned 18. I'm living in a new city. This is the only person I know, and this is someone that I look to like a brother. And so, we would he would like walk with me to the cafeteria, or we would like hang out often, and he would like take me to play, like, oh, there's this event going here, I'll take you and your roommates. And people would be like, oh, are you guys together? Oh, because there was no way that a boy and a girl could be friends in that situation, because guys have to automatically want to pursue this person. And I think that is really hard on men. And I think we do see a lot of, what we see, just like harmful behaviors, because men aren't, they don't know how to have these relationships with women, and they don't really know how to understand themselves because they're not really allowed to learn how to understand themselves. But yeah, I just wanted to add to what you're saying in that.
Yeah. It's a crazy, crazy world. So dating was much like what we had, which is, honestly, that's kind of what I expected, because what we had came from the same root as what you had. It just, developed in completely different directions, which is odd, and there's some history around why that is. But what other things would you say was really unusual or odd about Christ for the Nations?
There was a couple things. I guess the dating thing was like very strange. Something else that I felt like I wasn't really able to understand until I watched some of your videos with the history of William Branham and like learning more about Gordon and Lindsay, was the very odd relationship they have with Israel, and the way they treat it is so strange. So I grew up in a household that was very like, guys, you gotta support Israel no matter what. Like, we love Israel. Israel's they're number one. And so I had like my own kind of beliefs, but like that's something I grew up believing. And so when I went to CFNI, it like wasn't. It's not like I had never seen that before, but I felt like it was brought up to a degree that was just so bizarre. And if like you could walk into a room and it was like just like Israeli flags everywhere, and it felt at the time kind of like a weird Orientalism, like this obsession with it. And I don't know, it just was something that I was like, I don't know what's going on here, like y'all love this place. And then for mission trips, so they had mission trips every summer, and you could go to different places. I did 2 mission trips my time there. You have to do a mission trip to graduate. That's one of the kind of I guess like you get like credits for it. It's like one of the summer credits you get. So you go to all these different places, but and so whenever they're promoting like, okay, we're going to go here and we're going to go here, they would have people go up and talk, and it would be like a 5-minute thing. But for Israel, it was a whole 30 minutes. And it turns out it's not even like a mission trip. It's like a vacation that you go on, and they make it seem like, oh, we're going to go here and we're going to do this and do that. And then it's just so strange. And also it just feels like they don't really understand Judaism at all. And it just feels strange. It feels like it's like this magical place that they're disconnected from its history. They're disconnected from the people's history. That was my experience. That's how I saw it. But yeah, that was another thing that I felt was just strange when I was there.
You're not alone. It is odd. And I intend to take a deeper dive into that. I have not yet, because I'm trying to think through very clearly how to present it in a way that people will understand. The first time I tried it, I did not think strategically, and people just they fully didn't get what I was trying to say. But in a broad, 5-minute overview, Gordon Lindsay, who founded Christ for the Nations, was a key speaker in Christian identity conferences. These are the people that hate the Jews. They hate the Jews. So when you think of Christ for the Nations being supportive of Israel, and you think of Gordon Lindsay speaking in a group of men with a group of men in an audience who hates the Jews, you think, well, how does that work? That doesn't fit. And then you think of William Branham. William Branham was in the same way. They were hand in hand. Gordon Lindsay was his campaign manager, and Branham was supportive of Israel. How is this possible? Branham is teaching the core doctrines of Christian identity, the serpent seed doctrine, where Eve mated with the serpent and produced this bad bloodline versus this good bloodline. Well, the bad bloodline, according to Christian identity, is the Jews. So how can you be supportive of Israel? But you have to understand, supportive doesn't mean that you are in favor of. They're supportive in the Jewish agenda because, number one, if you include Israel in the agenda, you are including all of the doomsday scenarios that was presented in Latter Rain. Israel's where this is going to keep your eye on Israel, because this is where it's going to happen. They look for these prophecies. I may have mentioned some of these, but they look for like the red heifer prophecy. If you can find somebody who has a heifer that is red, oh my gosh, the end of the world is coming. I remember when this happened. This happened, I want to say it was 1993 or 4. It made news, and it was just like this little news blip that a red heifer has been found in Israel. When the cult churches, it's like, the end of the world is coming. Get your kids and sons and daughters ready. It's coming. And they'll look at planet alignments, all kinds of weird things. Well, it's because they're looking for Israel to be the signpost for the destruction and the coming end of days. And they picture Israel to be fully slaughtered. So they're supportive of this people that they feel sorry for, that they're going to be just fully slaughtered. They believe it's going to be fully destroyed in divine judgment, all of this nonsense. When Branham was preaching the quote-unquote gospel, and if I remember correctly, it was the same years Lindsay was involved with him. I'd have to go back and double-check that. But Branham taught that all of Israel was not the target of the gospel. He said the gospel was never intended for the Jews. He says something to the effect there will be some renegades who might break away from Israel and accept the gospel, renegades who might accept the gospel. But that's the way that this movement viewed the Jews. It wasn't that they viewed them as their Christian brothers or even potential converts. It was that this was the slaughterhouse. Let's watch for the slaughter because Armageddon will soon come after this.
Yeah, and it like you're saying, like that idea of, okay, we need to make sure that all the Jews go back to Israel. Like that's something that they taught, like, oh, it has to happen because, and then it feels like it's a doomsday cult. It's like, what? Like, what are we doing? Oh, I had a thought. I just lost it. But we did have a teacher that I felt he taught Old Testament. It was called the Old Testament Survey. It's like one of the classes. But he was a Jewish man who I think he was a rabbi or something. And I remember people would say like, "Oh, he doesn't get along with these people." Like I'm in my mind, I'm thinking it's probably because they have such wildly varying beliefs. Like he, believes his own things. And I will say a good thing that I experienced at Christ for the Nations was I feel like the head, like the people in charge kind of had like their beliefs, and they had some people who believed similar things that worked for them that would teach and stuff. But for the most part, you could meet people who believed very different things in those spaces. For example, like me and my husband, like we had kind of like our own beliefs, and like we didn't agree with, like, even me, like as a kid, I was like, I don't really know if I agree with some of these things. But you kind of meet that a lot, and there's even like teachers who were like, oh, this teacher says this, but I don't really agree with him. I think this. And that was kind of nice to see. I feel like that helped me a lot. Kind of fit, like it kind of validated me a little bit, and like the way that I was like, okay, well, I don't also believe that, and I guess that's kind of okay. But I will say between like the students, there was a lot of, oh, you don't agree with this teacher says, do you think you're better than him? Do you think you know better than him? And it was a lot of like, well, God put them in charge of us, so we have to agree with them. And I'd be like, they don't even agree with each other. So why are we expected to just accept everything? But yeah, it is weird and disappointing. And I feel like there was a lot of the celebrating of, oh, we love, Judaism and the Jewish beliefs and blah, blah, blah. But then you talk to someone, they don't know anything. Like they don't actually know history, they don't know, their values, they don't know practices, like just simple things, it's just strange. But yeah, I did, back to saying what I was saying before, I think something that was kind of good that I experienced at Christ for the Nations was the way that there was space at times for, dissenting beliefs. I remember there was this one teacher. So at Christ for the Nations, they love Martin Luther, love him. And this is one of my favorite things that ever happened. But on October 31st is the Reformation Day. And they had like this big celebration. And they had like speakers go up and stuff. And there's this one teacher we have who he only taught one class, which is criminal because he is incredible. But he went up there to talk a little bit about the history of Martin Luther, and he goes, oh yeah, guys, by the way, he was anti-Semitic. He said he was going through the history, and like everyone in the room was just like really uncomfortable. And I was like, thank goodness someone is saying it. But no, that guy was really cool. He taught, I think, like history of religions and like different beliefs and stuff, and he did it from a place that wasn't like, oh, they're evil, like, ooh, they're spooky and they think differently than us. But it was like, okay, here's like historically how these beliefs came to be. Here's actually some of like the historical connections between these beliefs and like how some of these things like linked into each other. And I thought that was really cool. But yeah, shout out to that guy. I think about him all the time.
Yeah, there were a few people who tried to buck the system in Branhamism, and they weren't really able to. See, it diverged and it created two different pathways of two different types of groups. With Christ for the Nations, whenever Lindsay was working with Branham, it was this mentality that we have a great movement with all of these hundreds of ministers, each doing their own thing. And for a period of time, that worked out. But they had an open theology. And what I mean by that is one guy could preach something that was completely against the core belief system of another guy. And this was allowed. They even had an article describing what happens when this is the case. But especially during the southern states in that era, you would have guys who would say, wait, them's fighting words. They would go off at it, right? And that's the way it was. Well, eventually there was fights that kind of broke out, maybe not fist fights, but they would really get against each other. Whenever Branham was when he was really cut off by most of the denominations, AOG cut him off early, but some of the others followed after. And whenever he started to get sanctioned, that's when things really began to change. Because when you sanction, now all of the money that flows through those different groups, when the money's cut off, it changes, sadly, a lot of the things in Christianity that this was built on top of. So Lindsay kind of shifted directions. Well, Branham becomes isolated, and it became an isolationist cult. But Lindsay became more of a, I don't know what the word is. He tamed down quite a bit. He may have even reformed quite a bit. But some of the core belief systems, like what you're describing, he did not reform from this at all. And this is literally, if you watch a movie or a documentary on what it's like living in a cult, everything that you've described in Christ for the Nations is what they describe. So how do you reconcile that? And that's part of the reason I've been wanting to have more people on, because people aren't aware that this is still going on at Christ for the Nations.
Yeah. And I don't know, I think it was kind of hard. Like, if you would have told me this, like when I was at Christ for the Nations, like a student, like a little 19-year-old Lexi, I feel like, nah, it's not like that. It's not that bad. But I feel like the more and more I started kind of like educating myself more, even just wanting, because I've always kind of been, I guess, curious is the best word. Like, I've always wanted to like know more. And I grew up Christian. My parents were youth pastors, and my mom and dad were like, they really got me to like read the Bible for myself and things like that. But also I read a lot. I was really interested in history, so I read a lot of like things outside of just like biblical literature. So I feel like that helped a lot of kind of like understanding different ways of thinking. And so already like going into Christ for the Nations, I kind of wasn't like, my worldview wasn't so narrow, I guess I could say. Like, it wasn't just to the bubble of like, I know church world and that's it. Like, I feel like I kind of had a little bit of an understanding of things outside of my world. And I feel like that helped. Whenever like little like alarms were kind of going off, I'd be like, okay, this feels weird. It kind of helped me work through that. And I think also having friends outside of that world helped a lot too. But I think since I've been out of CFNI, I love learning about different cults. And like, I watched so many documentaries about like other high control groups. Like, me and my husband, we were obsessed with like learning about like the Nexium case. And I don't know if you've heard about that one, but just learning like the ways in which how people can, what's the word I'm looking for? I think something I've learned is people don't trust themselves. They don't trust their guts. And that's something I saw a lot when I was there. And I guess I can just thank my parents for this, but I would have like healthy disagreements with my parents, sometimes not very healthy, but like me and my dad sometimes would debate over like end times theology. He would say this thing and I'd be like, Dad, the rapture is not real. And I was like 16, like getting into these discussions with my dad, but like they created a space for me to like disagree with him and to like trust what I was learning on my own. And, also kind of be like, all right, have a little bit of, except maybe you can be wrong sometimes, and so I feel like that was developed a little bit in me when I was younger. So when I went to Christ for the Nations, I had a really good friend who like, she wouldn't do anything without getting advice from some of the teachers. I would try to give her advice and she'd be like, oh, well, I don't really know. I think I'm going to go talk to this teacher. And then she'd be like, okay, this teacher told me this, so I'm going to do it. And I was like, dude, I literally told you to do that. Like, that's exactly what I told you. But it was this thing of like, they feel like they have to have some kind of person who is like connected more to God than they are to tell them how to go about this and how to make these decisions. And I feel like because I didn't have that as much, I was able to kind of step back, and at least it opened the door for me to do that. It definitely took time. Like, I don't think I kind of fully realized like where I was and like what was happening until maybe I was like 23. But yeah, I think that's one of the saddest things is, yeah, people just don't really trust themselves. They don't trust that, like, because there's this thing in the denomination I grew up in where it's like, you have to hear God for yourself. Like, you have to learn how to hear the Holy Spirit yourself. And they kind of like brag about how that's something that they can do. But at the same time, like, they don't actually pursue that. Like, I mean, for me, I have my own beliefs now, and I don't really, I'm not very like spiritual anymore. I'm kind of like, if you want to like figure out what to do with your life, you know, if you want to make decisions that you feel God would be proud of, just, I don't know, look at Jesus's life, things he valued, I guess. Like that could be that could be a step. But yeah, it would just felt like a lot of people, they needed someone to tell them what to believe, what to do, like, and so like we had like these figures. So there would be people who, even if they were kind of like well-meaning, I guess, just to be generous, they were, it was almost, there was a bit of cult of personality around certain leaders, and there's to an unhealthy degree, I would say.
Have you ever wondered how the Pentecostal movement started, or how the progression of modern Pentecostalism transitioned through the latter rain, charismatic, and other fringe movements into the New Apostolic Reformation? You can learn this and more on William Branham Historical Research's website, william-branham.org. On the books page of the website, you can find the compiled research of John Collins, Charles Paisley, Stephen Montgomery, John McKinnon, and others, with links to the paper, audio, and digital versions of each book. You can also find resources and documentation on various people and topics related to those movements. If you want to contribute to the cause, you can support the podcast by clicking the Contribute button at the top. And as always, be sure to like and subscribe to the audio or video version that you're listening to or watching. On behalf of William Branham Historical Research, we want to thank you for your support. I'm of the firm opinion that many people who have gone through what some call it deconversion, some call it, some even go so far as call it losing their faith. I always go back and I think through the question, well, what did they have originally? Mm-hmm. This thing was called Christianity, but I can assure you, if you consider what the Bible says is Christianity, these groups, many of them do not have it. So if they're deconverting, which God are they deconverting from? Mm-hmm. So I'm one of the few people that I love whenever I get somebody who has a different opinion, especially somebody who has seen the dark side of these groups, to come on and talk. And you see in the comment feeds, I get all kinds of flack for it because there's this mindset that everybody must be of the same opinion, and that opinion is the right and just way that people should live because it is my opinion. And I'm of the opinion that there are groups of diverse people who have different opinions, and that's how the world works. Even within Christianity, the biggest shock for me came when I went to the first church that we went to after the cult, and they started talking about the Revelation, the end of days scenario, and the minister was very, very strangely similar to what I believed in Branhamism, which shocked me. They had really taken it, I guess, probably through the same influence. I don't know how they got that. But I was talking to another guy who was, I think he was either the assistant pastor or one of the high-up elders, and he was like, I don't believe any of that thing that he said. And he went off into what he believed, which is what I thought mainstream Christian, by and large, believed. But then I had another person, also a ranking elder in the church, who gave me a different opinion than those two. And I'm like, how does that work? In the group that I grew up in, you had to have the same belief. You cannot have this variation because it's vitally important that you understand my belief and my understanding, because I'm right, the whole world is wrong, us versus them. It's always us versus them. Yeah. And so hearing your description of why you left, it kind of matches that. I have talked to other people, some who, for one reason or another, can't come on the podcast, who have left Christ for the Nations. And it's a very common theme. When you leave Christ for the Nations, many people go through this deconversion period. And how long that lasts is really up to the person. But it all comes back to the doctrines, which are very unhealthy, according to what they're telling me. Mm-hmm. And the difference between mainstream Christianity and what they're describing is that the Christian doctrines are, for mainstream Christianity, are made in such a way to uplift people, to help people, support people, help one another grow. But what they're describing is very much like what I came out of. It's us versus them. It's very destructive. What are your thoughts on this? Would you consider it to be a destructive foundation, or would you consider them to be more mainstream?
I've been trying to like think about this too, because I do feel like it's a little bit of both. Like there are definitely people who, okay, how do I say this? Because they do have a lot of that mainstream where it's like, um, this is how you know, get deeper with God and things like that. And they teach the way that they feel like that's how you achieve that. But a big thing at CFNI too is like, here's how to have a successful ministry. Here's how to be a pastor. And there's like a lot of that, but something that I feel that it's not necessarily often the teachers saying it themselves, but we have a lot of guest speakers that get invited that I feel have a lot of us versus them kind of mentality. And like they have brought on like political people who straight up have said things like, we have to have more kids because Muslims are having a lot of kids, so we got to have more kids. And I remember I was taking notes and I was like, that's bad. What are you saying right now? That's horrible. And like the alarm bells were going off, you know? There's a part of me that like wants to be, that's, I guess because I grew up in a lot of like those spaces, and like I know them, so I'm like, I don't feel like you are perpetrating this thing. But if I'm being honest, like the Seven Mountains, have you heard of like the Seven Mountains doctrine? They love that. They love that. So yeah, they're all about that. They are all about that. And I've even talked about that with one of the teachers before, because he was talking about it with us and explaining it to us. And I remember being like thinking about the mountains, and I was like, I feel like a lot of this belief, it reminds me of like when Jesus was tempted in the wilderness and he was like, he rejected all of those things. Like, I don't know why we're teaching this when we saw Jesus reject these things. So that's something that I don't know. I don't want to say it's like it's blatant and it's like in your face, but I do think that like it is there. For example, I feel like, I'm sorry, I'm trying to like think about how to explain this. So I really feel like there are remnants of the history of this ministry that still remain. For example, like we had this class that teaches, it's supposed to teach like Genesis, and they love talking about the Nephilim. It's a thing. It's a thing. But there was this one time where the teacher said, he was talking about Machu Picchu, and he said something along the lines of, it couldn't have been these primitive people. They couldn't have been smart enough to make this. So it had to be aliens or demons. And I remember being like, dude, that's racist. You can't say that. That is so messed up. Like, how can you say, and like, for example, my husband's Peruvian, and he's like, no, we could do that. Like, we had mathematicians, we had incredible scientists. Like, what is he saying right now? So there's a lot of like those remnants beliefs that I feel like are there, and I don't feel like it was blatant, but like I feel like when you understand like what those beliefs are, you can see kind of like, I don't want to call them dog whistles, but like you almost see like, okay, I feel like what he's saying here is kind of coming from this place. Do you know what I mean? But I guess just to answer your question, I never felt like it was like a blatant, like those people out there, but those beliefs definitely were held by peers that you would see, or like people you would talk to in the cafeteria, and they would say things, you'd be like, that's not good, y'all, that's not good. But yeah, you definitely see like moments where those things kind of like leak out, and when you see it, it is disturbing for sure.
Yeah, what you're describing is exactly what I was expecting.
Okay.
I didn't want to push you to openly say that. I wanted to see what you felt. But what they're doing, so the Christian identity core doctrine included an alien component. The alien component was that out in the outer reaches of space was your celestial body, and one day the UFOs would come back and you'd be swept up. Gordon Lindsay himself had a number of books on UFOs, which tells you what the what the foundation of this doctrine was. And they teach that, but they don't openly teach it because it sounds crazy. So what they do is you have to go through these stages of, they call it Christian maturity or spiritual maturity. What it essentially means is they want to feel out, are you going to think I'm crazy if I tell you the UFO stuff?
That makes a lot of sense, honestly. Because it became a joke. Like some of my friends, my peers, we would joke about it, like, oh man, we're going to this class, they're talking about aliens again, like, and we would just be like, we look at each other like, what in the world? And we just kind of like brush it off. But I feel like in retrospect, like looking back, I'm like, that's kind of messed up actually. Like, I don't think that was good now that I'm thinking about it.
I mean, the doctrine itself it's just wacky. It's not. I love a good movie. Like Stargate is one of my favorite movies of all time. Stargate.
Yeah.
So if they were preaching it in the context of, hey, we're all going to get together and we're going to talk about Stargate, or we're going to pretend like we're in some sort of a fantasy world, that's totally different. I would be on board with that. But what they're trying to do is frame the biblical passages. If they can find one word that is just obscure enough that people can't understand what it means, that they can apply to this mystery doctrine, whatever it is they call it, then they'll push it and they'll try to say that that's what that passage means. The rest of the world doesn't know, but we, brothers and sisters, we have the secret knowledge. It's basically Gnosticism is what it is essentially. We have the secret knowledge, the gnosis.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, another thing was they loved talking about dinosaurs, and they have a museum with dinosaur bones. And in your first semester, they take you. Oh, I forget where it is in Texas, but it's like kind of like a creek, and it's like where they had found like remains, like bones. I watched a documentary about it the other day about how like the Christian world, like actually like they obsessed over it. Like there was this pastor who was a businessman, and the whole history of it is so weird, but they make us go, and he's like a young earther. So I don't know what the point of it was. I don't know, even because they didn't really teach anything scientific. I don't think they know that much anyway. So it just felt random. It just felt like, why are we doing this? But yeah, they have a museum with a bunch of like dinosaur bones at CFNI. But I will say something that was really weird too, that I know this is kind of taking a little bit of a turn, but I feel like it will add a little bit. But in retrospect, after learning more about Gordon Lindsay's past and the history with William Branham, this disturbs me a lot. But they really, really elevate the Gordon and Freda. Like they are just these people. We have to learn all about their past, and we have to read all their books, which also I thought I'd bring this Gordon Lindsay book. Yes. I still have this thing. I was reading it the other day and I was like, this is insane. There's some stuff in there. If you want it, I'll mail it to you if you want it.
Absolutely.
So you don't have to buy it. I don't need this anymore, so I'll send it to you. But But yeah, so which interesting enough, I'm like, they made us read all these books about them, and I didn't know anything about the stuff that you were saying, because after I'd watched some of your videos, I went and was doing some research, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is like for real, like there's documents on this stuff, and they don't say any of it. They don't tell us about any of it, but they want us to read all their books, and people call her Mama Lindsay, and it's weird the way they talk about it, and like her bedroom that's on campus is like untouched. They haven't moved, like her closet's still there, her bed's still there. And when I was working there, they're like, we're gonna turn it into a museum. And I'm like, girl, no one wants to go there. That's weird. No one wants to see that. But it's very strange. And I think like knowing what they were up to back in the day, it just like makes me feel so icky. And I wish people knew more about this. After everything that happened with the shooter, I posted some stuff on my Instagram talking about just sharing some articles, because I still have a lot of people who were staff and are staff still that like follow me and stuff like that. And so I shared it, and I was like, hey, like you guys should do some research. Like this stuff doesn't just happen in a vacuum. Like we need to learn more about, how things lead up, and like how harmful beliefs can like leak into, as good, like well-intentioned and well-meaning as we can be, like these things can leak into things. And a lot of people were messaging me like, dude, thank you so much. Like I know so many people were like asking me for your links and stuff, because it's just like, it's so helpful, because we didn't know anything. Like they don't tell us anything. I don't even know if staff who like are there now know any of this stuff. But yeah, all that to say, it's the way they elevate them is just, it's like borderline, like they like make them saints, it's strange. It's bizarre.
Hero worship. So the interesting part of all of this is I was hoping to build to a climax, but I didn't want to drive you there, because I wanted people to watch you openly talk about it and go to the same place that I was headed. So Branham created this scheme to basically create cults, and there were numerous, countless cults that spun off of this. International House of Prayer in Kansas City, for example, was basically Branhamism 2.0. And think about the similarities. It has the hero worship. There is none greater than Mike Bickle. It has the prophetic history. When you come on board, you've got to know our history, because that makes us better than the others. We're more special than the other groups because we have the prophetic history. And yet we have all of these secret things that we're not going to tell the outside world. When you come to our website, you're not going to know half the stuff that we stand for or believe. And what it essentially comes down to, Dr. Stephen Hassan calls it the bite model of authoritarian control. It is the true signs and markings of a cult. Are they controlling your behavior, which is something you've described? Are they controlling the information? Are they concealing things, which is something you've described? Are they controlling your thoughts and your emotions, which are things that you've described? So in this podcast, without even meaning to or intending to, you have basically branded it as a cult.
Actually, it's funny you bring up IHOP, because we have our own version. It's called GLOP, Gordon Lindsay House of Prayer. Yeah.
The one thing that I do want to go back to, because it was weird to you, and it isn't weird to me at all, is the dinosaurs. Why the fascination with dinosaurs? There's everybody listening who hears this, they're thinking, well, scratching their head, why is that? If you understand Christian identity, they believe and taught, and I can't find Gordon Lindsay writing about this because they've destroyed all of his Christian identity books that he wrote. I'm assuming he believed it too if he was attending the conferences. The conferences that he attended in, I think it was Oregon, they believed that there was a race that pre-existed before the Garden of Eden, and they were the mud people. And Christian identity taught that whenever, when the fall happened and they were banished from the garden, well, the good seed continued through Adam and his grandchildren, great-grandchildren. The bad seed mated with the mud people, which is why the black skin. And all of that would go back to the dinosaurs, which creates this fascination for anybody in Christian identity to understand the dinosaurs, because one day they're going to find that missing link. They're going to find that mud person, and all of this can be unraveled.
That's crazy. And, wow, okay. That's very illuminating for me because, yeah, they have like multiple buildings, but one of them you walk in and immediately it's just a giant dinosaur, like bone. And then you go upstairs and like I said, they believe in like young earth and all that stuff. And so they have like these paintings of like cavemen, and then there's like an empty museum. Like they want it to be a museum, but nobody wants to go. Like nobody's interested, but it's just like dinosaur bones and things like that. But now that you're saying that, like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
See, I didn't know any of that. But it makes sense, like why they teach first semesters. Mm-hmm. They talk through all of that stuff. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's really interesting. See, I didn't know much of that. I knew that they believed in a race that pre-existed because Branham, in one obscure sermon, he talks about it. He talks about the race that pre-existed Adam, which, if you're a believer in what the Bible says and you're sola scriptura, you're by the scripture alone, you can't believe this because there is no precedent for mud people in the Bible.
Yeah.
But he says something weird like before Adam's race, there was another race with hands like monkeys and feet like bears or some weird thing. And he's essentially describing a drawing of the mud people that was passed out among the Christian identity circles. I saw it in one magazine. I can't remember which. But he's describing that, and that's kind of what they believed. But I was not familiar with any of that until I read Michael Barkun's book, Religion and the Racist Right. If you want to know the true history of what you came from, that was actually what helped me understand that Gordon Lindsay was in that movement, because Barkun lays out the entire lineage of the Christian identity movement, and it passed through California and Oregon, and there were these massive, massive conferences. They were called I think they were the Anglo-Saxon Federation conferences, and that's the one that Gordon Lindsay was speaking at. So this was a big, big deal. And Henry Ford of the Ford Motor Company was sponsoring and behind a lot of this. There's a lot of politics/business tied into it. So there was a lot of, what that gives you is there was a lot of finances backing it. So this was a very profitable thing to be in, which is probably why, according to my opinion, why Gordon Lindsay was in it in the first place. We can make money doing this. But he seems to be impacted by the doctrine because even after Christian identity started to diminish, he's still holding on to some of the doctrines. So if you read that book, Religion and the Racist Right, you'll understand most of your heritage.
Yeah, I'm going to look into it. And you're talking about like Oregon and his time over there, and I actually just like kind of like see if there's anything I was like missing from this book, like that I forgot that might have been interesting. There's a whole section where he talks about him being in Oregon, and he doesn't mention any of those things at all, and I'm like, I guess that makes sense why he wouldn't do that. But it's a lot. It's a lot. And I think like something that makes me kind of sad, like in regards to all of this, is like just how well-meaning a lot of the people who like go to CFNI and even like work there, like there are people who give up their whole lives to go to Christ for the Nations. So I worked in admissions for a couple of months. I only lasted a few months. I had to get out of there because I feel like when you're a student, you see things, but when you work there, you really see things. So I was working there for a few months and then I got out. But I was doing admissions, and for a bit I was working with international admissions. So I was working with like students who were coming from abroad. And people would talk about like, yeah, I sold my house, I sold my car, I'm bringing all 4 of my kids and my wife, and we're coming. And I'm like, you're giving up everything to come to this school that, like, I mean, I spent a lot of time here, but I'm I don't think it's worth it. Like giving up all and having to pay for visas, which aren't cheap. They're not cheap. Doing all the paperwork and then living in the housing that's there, which isn't the best. The food's not the best. And I mean, like, it's not, Dallas isn't fantastic. It's not a great place to live, I would say. But it's just, people really like think that it's their life is going to change like when they come. And like, there's like a slogan that CFNI had for a long time where it was like, where dreams find direction. And it makes me sad because I'm like, people come here thinking that like, they're going to find their purpose. Like they come literally thinking like, oh, God's going to do something so big. And, you know, oh man, like my life is going to be huge after this. Like, oh, my dreams are going to come true. Like it's going to be crazy. I'm going to be this incredible person. And then it doesn't happen. And then people get really sad and disappointed. And I feel like it's what we saw with that guy, Vance. I don't remember his last name, but this thing of like, this is what I need. Like my life is going to take off from here. And it's anticlimactic, and I just think people get really disappointed and sad. Like I don't know, I know a lot of people who gave up a lot because it's not cheap. The tuition is not cheap. People come and they give free labor also, because one of the things you have to do for summer credits is you either have to go on a mission trip or you have to volunteer at a camp. You pay to work full-time job every single day. Like you barely sleep, you work so much, and people are paying for it to do that. And I just feel like when people graduate or when they leave, they're like, well, what was the point? Like nothing's changed. I mean, I don't even have skills to get a real job. Like it's either I go into ministry or I don't do anything. And it's just, I don't know, it just makes me really sad because there really are people thinking that like something really incredible is going to happen, or they think sometimes it's not even that selfish. Sometimes it's sort of like, I want to be a tool for the gospel. I want to give my life for this. And like, I want to help people. Like there are people who genuinely, they're all their heart, they want to like help others. And then they get here and they're like, I'm not able to do any of that. And it's just sad. It just makes me really sad.
It is sad. It's basically, it's not helping further the gospel, it's helping further the organization. The bigger the numbers get, the better the organization looks, and let's attract the people, let's get it bigger. It's bad. And back to Vance Belter, it isn't that they taught him to do what he did,
right?
But they have all of the makings. If you read Dr. Stephen Hassan's book, Combating Cult Mind Control, they have all of the makings to create a destructive group that can radicalize people. And when you radicalize a person, you radicalize them on the ideology. Well, then the brain will sometimes go to the conclusions of how to enforce the ideology. So what he did may not have necessarily been taught at Christ for the Nations, but if he was radicalized, and he was radicalized by them, if that is the case, then they could have been responsible for what happened. And that's for the courts to decide, and I'm certain because no court in the United States really understands cult mind control, it'll probably never come out to be this. But when you examine it, it's sad because there are so many people that, like you said, give up everything to come join this, and in the end, what do they get? They get really nothing. So thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, of course. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, if you've enjoyed our show and you want more information, you can check us out on the web. You can find us at william-branham.org. For more about the dark side of the New Apostolic Reformation, you can read Weaponized Religion, From Christian Identity to the NAR, available on Amazon, Kindle, and Audible.